Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Mark Johnson. He founded Foster Parrots. We'll also talk about New England Wildlife Sanctuary, that and more when we come back, so stay with us.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at energysavers.gov.
Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Mark Johnson, first timer on the show. He founded Foster Parrots and also is a part of New England Wildlife Sanctuary. First of all, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now you have been on, this is small time for you because you've been on Animal Planet and others too, right?
Yeah, Scientific American Frontiers. Alan Alda actually.
Alan Alda.
Yeah, came visited my house.
Wow. So let's talk about Foster Parrots. What is that?
Foster Parrots is an organization that I started because I started in 1989 because I bought a parrot and found that there were a lot of people who wanted to find homes for their parrots. And I had a small pottery studio in Cambridge, and people were coming in and going, "My uncle has one of those, he doesn't want any more." In 1989, I'm thinking, if somebody spent a couple of $1,000 on a parrot, which the prices were much higher in those days, they've dropped significantly now, but in those days, somebody that would spend $2,000 on a parrot and then come and give it to me, I thought something was wrong.
Yeah.
And also the traditional shelters, the SPCAs, the Animal Rescue Leagues, nobody was addressing the problem because it was a new one.
Right. They didn't know how to handle it, right?
Well, no, they didn't have staff that was qualified to handle parrots, or they didn't know enough themselves to actually take them in. And so I had a 3-room apartment at the end of the 3-room apartment with 30 birds living there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
and a landlord? Did you have a landlord?
I was my own landlord.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whew. On that one.
My sister and I owned the building.
Wow. There was a lot of conversation, I would imagine, on that, and also in the room itself, right?
Indeed. Indeed.
So that's how it all started out. How did it evolve to where it is now, and what is it at this point?
Well, obviously, after a certain period of time, I noticed, I knew that this was going to be well, indeed.
Yeah.
It was going to be a bigger problem than I had thought of. And at the same time, we were thinking about moving to a bigger house just to have a garden and instead of the 3-room apartment. And I moved to Rockland, Massachusetts, where we had an attached barn, which ended up being one of the "if you build it, they will come" phenomenon.
It was already built, and they came.
Well,
right?
and they came, and
yeah.
Over the next few years, I'd say 5 or 6 years, we eventually had over 300 parrots living in the attached barn and the house, and it was growing to be much bigger than anything I could ever deal with. And again, still, the SPCAs were not addressing the problem. And in some cases, I actually had people tell me that they thought I was manufacturing the problem. By offering people a place to take their unwanted parrot, that I was causing the unwanted parrot problem.
I mean, they wouldn't say that if you were if you were a shelter for dogs or cats or any kind of a sanctuary for other animals.
No, and I think that the dog and cat issue is so widely recognized as an overpopulation issue that something like 80 million cats, 80 million dogs for a total population of 160 million. And we euthanize something like 5 million dogs and cats, and that is significantly fewer than we did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was 10 million we were euthanizing every year. So
that's why they advocate, spay, neuter. You can't really do that with a parrot, can you?
Well, you can't really do that with a parrot, but the other thing about parrots is that they aren't roaming the streets.
Right.
And so the unwanted dog and cat issue was in people's faces.
Right.
And so it was easily recognized that they had to be rounded up and either adopted or destroyed. And so that's where the beginnings of that happened. Parrots, you can't neuter them, you can't spay them easily. It's a very, very delicate operation, and a lot of vets aren't willing to do it. It's becoming more well known, but still not done very widely.
Let me back up and ask you this question. You know, people buy dogs, they buy cats. Do people buy a parrot because it's a unique animal? You know, it's a conversation piece to talk about,
Sure.
and then they realize after a while that they might not be able to handle it or control it, or just flat out don't want it anymore?
Well, human nature really is at fault here, in the sense that humans are impulsive by nature. We tend to want something unusual, and if we can do something that's a little different from our neighbor, that's appealing to us. We also tend to like the biggest, reddest, shiniest of whatever.
Whether it's a car or a parrot.
Or a
Yeah.
parrot.
Yeah.
And so it is a problem in the sense that people don't think about it before they do it. They want the instant gratification, and the educational process that they should have put themselves through in the first place would have let them know that this is going to be a much more difficult thing than getting a dog or a cat.
And it should be easier for them to get that education now with the internet. You know,
Absolutely.
You know, you can go and learn about it.
Absolutely.
But like you said, that impulse aspect. Parrots aren't cheap either. It's not an inexpensive pet to purchase, right?
They become a lot cheaper. And in fact, I argue that parrots are actually valueless now. If I have 20 people a week calling me up to say, here, please take my parrot, and here's a donation, perhaps they aren't really worth what they're being sold for in the stores. It's also one of the new car drive it off the parking lot phenomena, where the minute you take a car off the parking lot, or the sales lot, the value,
depreciates.
it's depreciated by half or something. Certainly, I think people tend to buy baby parrots, and then as they mature and their true natures come out, they hate men, they hate women, they hate your wife, or whatever. They scream all day, they bite you.
Messy.
Instantly, that value, messy is certainly one of the most important things. Their value goes right down. And so we've often seen people selling parrots. The parrot will be free, but the cage is $200, and they're trying to recoup something, and you can't get it from the parrot. Yeah.
Now, as a person who has a parrot sanctuary, and you are trying to find homes for parrots, are you in the same situation that a person who would be advocating adopting a dog or a cat from a shelter as opposed to purchasing at a pet store? You probably have, I would imagine, a negative view on pet store selling of parrots.
Well, we've been one of the voices against parrots as pets for a variety of reasons, because they're very intelligent. Because if you took the standard of care we offer for parrots from the traditional pet trade viewpoint and applied it to any other animal, it would amount to animal cruelty. Keeping them in a cage for 24 hours a day. You wouldn't do that to your dog or your cat, and yet you have a flighted animal.
That's a good point. He has wings. He should be the one that'd be the freest.
The freest,
Right?
indeed.
Yeah.
And so from just a philosophical standpoint, we've always thought that parrots don't belong in captivity. They're the symbol of freedom. These are the animals that we hold up on as symbols of our freedom, on our money and our national symbols.
And our pirate shoulders, right?
And yet, we're more than willing to just completely strip them of. In fact, we're willing to physically alter them by clipping their wings to suit our needs.
Yeah. And that's a big no-no, really, for any bird, right?
Well, the most common cause the most common cause of death in our sanctuary is heart disease. So these are birds that should be flying hundreds of miles a week, in some cases hundreds of miles a day, in the search of food and playing and flying back to their roosting spots and their day spots, and we're stopping. They become couch potatoes, perch potatoes, as it were, and then we feed them a crappy diet.
Right.
So,
just like a dog or a cat can be overweight in your house. A funny thing, Cesar Millan has his dog show, and he says the biggest thing that people say, the biggest mistake that people say is, well, I have a big yard for my dog. Right. There's no yard that's big enough. You got to get out there and walk them and exercise them. And in your case, they should be flying like crazy.
Right, and people often ask me how big should a cage be for a Amazon parrot, and I'll say, well, several acres, would be a good start, Really, I just don't think they belong in captivity. And we go back to the educational issue. The pet trade has always wanted you to buy parrots. So what they're going to tell you is they're easy to keep. The diet is conveniently kept in this bag, and all you have to do is dish it out. And that they're ideal apartment pets. And so
wow.
we've always taken the standpoint of advocating on behalf of the parrot. And just the opposite is true. And I'll let people judge for themselves which they think is true, and maybe there's middle ground somewhere.
Considering, you know, that all that you've said, it must be incredibly difficult for you or anybody else to find what you would consider to be an appropriate home for a parrot should they leave the sanctuary. What do you do?
Well, the sanctuary birds actually aren't up for adoption.
Okay.
They are, in rare cases, adopted out to people who are volunteering or staff members who fall in love with a particular bird and can
meet how to take care of them.
But the number one thing, criteria, is that the bird must be taking a step up. He's taken a step up when we took him on, or him or her on, and now we want him to move another step forward in his care. So it would be best if you know, somebody that can offer them more space, more freedom, more time out, more one-on-one commitment. And most of the parrots that are at the sanctuary are also, I would classify as the misfits of the pet trade. So out of every 100 parrots we bring in, maybe 75 of them are great candidates for adoption. But there's always going to be a few that are just too medically challenged, or aggressive, or need special needs birds that we really can only adopt them out under very, very special circumstances.
Are those the reasons why they came to the sanctuary in the first place? It's just that they just weren't able to be in society or in human society?
Well, I would say right now the top reasons for people surrendering parrots would be life changes, and right now with the economy being what it is, I think animal causes all across the board are suffering from.
Right, that's going to be low on some people's priority
list. And it's like I've got to move to an apartment, and I've got to move next week, and I can't take this parrot or dog or cat or fill in the blank with me. But that, and then behavioral issues. An interesting thing about behavioral issues is that it's usually just parrots behaving naturally.
That's their natural behavior.
Yeah, screaming. If you have a mate you want to contact that's a mile away in thick forest, you have to be able to scream your guts out.
Right.
And so do
usually
that.
they scream at me, but that's a whole.
Do that in and right. Well, indeed, domestic issues.
Yes, yes.
But do that in an apartment. And in some cases, do it in a separate house. And we've got taken in parrots that have been kicked out of their houses because neighbors.
Wow.
We're not talking.
You know that's loud.
Yeah.
What's 30 parrots in an apartment room like, by the way?
It's
is that
messy.
loud?
No, it is loud.
Loud and messy. We're going to take a break and come back. Is there a website that people can go throughout the course of the show? By the way, people have been looking at pictures and stuff as we've been talking. Is there a website people can go to?
FosterParrots.com.
Beautiful. Go to the website, check it out. And we'll come back and talk more with Mark Johnson of Foster Parrots and New England Wildlife Sanctuary. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us.
I've never been the type to ask for help, but I had enough.
Thank you for calling the Veterans Crisis Line. How can I help you?
Life still has its challenges, but my family and I can deal with them better now. Veterans Crisis Line. It's your call.
RBIs and 36 homers. Swings at the first pitch and fouls it deep back into the stands.
Chill raw and prepared foods promptly. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Any questions?
What kind of service plan does this come with?
Unlimited.
Can I keep my same phone number?
Absolutely.
How do I change the ringtone?
Just hook it up to your computer.
Does it have a camera? What's the warranty? Does it come in silver? Can I put my party shuffle on this? Does it have a 3.5 millimeter headset jack? You sell a lot of these?
It's the one I carry.
You ever get those phantom vibrations in your pocket?
Any questions?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Ask questions. For the 10 questions everyone should know, go to ahrq.gov.
Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Mark Johnson. He is the founder of Foster Parrots, and that resides on New England Wildlife Sanctuary, correct?
That's right.
Talk about the sanctuary a little bit itself.
Well, the sanctuary was founded kind of by accident 4 years ago when my wife and I was actually doing some work with the wild parrots in Connecticut that were being captured and euthanized by the local electric utility company in West Haven. And I was building platforms, alternate nesting platforms that people could put in their backyards for these parrots to get them off of the poles. And a man offered me a space in his building in Hope Valley, Rhode Island, and eventually said, well, I'll rent you the space. It was an old chicken farm for $1 a year. So I had this amazing building of 400 feet long.
Wow.
By 40 feet wide. And so it was a perfect opportunity to do the sanctuary project that I had in my mind. Up to now, it was in my house. I had 350 birds living in my house.
Is that it? That's all?
That's all I
Yeah.
had. Yeah. It was just enough to make you go deaf.
So the parrots reside on the sanctuary,
Right, well,
which turned into the sanctuary.
Right, and we now have over 600 parrots there. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, wanted to put parrots in the context of wild animals as opposed to domesticated animals. So we also have rescued a few other exotic species that are commonly kept as pets. The red ear sliders that I used to see in the dime store when I was a kid for $1 are now 35, 40 years old and the size of a dinner plate, and people that have kept them alive that long have been keeping them in their bathtubs. So we have a big red ear slider pond.
Wow.
We have giant tortoises, we have some African crested porcupines, and we have some Patagonian cavies, and we actually have some bats that were from the Mystic Aquarium when they closed down their bat exhibit.
I was going to ask you if you had, if you dealt with any of the other, institutions of things of that sort that deal with wildlife, even if it's completely opposite. Like Mystic Aquarium, you probably don't have any, beluga whales at your place or anything like that. But do you deal with the other type places? Or?
We try to keep as many contacts open as possible with all of the different animal-oriented organizations, like the wildlife rehabbers. Very often people will call us up and have a hawk or a squirrel or something they need help with. And also we're interested in possibly offering those people space on our property. We have 15 acres now, which we actually bought the property. So we're interested in turning it into a wildlife sanctuary for not just domesticated but exotic wildlife and then native wildlife.
You have to start worrying at some point about species that really may not get along with each other or may hunt one another, right?
Absolutely. I think we do draw the line right now at not taking in predators.
Right.
I mean, it's just we have to deal with feeding them animals, and that gets kind of tricky.
How are you funded, by the way? Because this is tough, especially you talk about the economy that we're in.
Right. And actually, 50% of our funding comes from grant writing, and that over the past couple of years has become tenuous.
Yeah.
And so a larger proportion of our funding is through private individuals who just are concerned about the parrot issue, are general animal people, or know us and know our mission and know the dedication that we've given for the last 20 years. So.
And private donations,
private
really
donations,
just people coming.
Sure.
It's not the type of place where you can go up and kind of take a tour, though, right?
We do show people around. We're happy to show people around, but we ask that they do it by appointment only.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that taking care of 600 birds and other animals, we actually have a lot of work to do to get done before the day's done. Yeah. And so we like to schedule people in the afternoon, preferably on weekends, when we have a higher staff. And we would love, actually we do school visits as well.
So like a field trip can come by?
Yes, field trip can come, or we can come and visit the schools. We don't bring animals with us, but we do address a lot of the issues about conservation and just domestic versus wild animals as pets. And
dragging the animals along would be kind of too traumatic for them.
it can be, yeah. And it's we wouldn't want to put the animal through that.
What's it like running a sanctuary when a tropical storm rolls through?
Well, of course, I try to play it cool and try not to let anybody see how worried I really am.
Yeah.
But it is scary. It is very scary. And this was this last one, Irene, was a hurricane just until the very minute it hit.
And then it dropped to a tropical storm.
Right.
But, you know, considering the damage that happened, imagine what it would have been like if it really was a Cat 2 hurricane or something like that.
Right.
But everything was okay?
Interestingly enough, we do have a large, very heavy-duty cement building on the property, so we can evacuate all the animals to that building, which would probably be fine and safe in the case of a serious hurricane.
Right.
And we are actually listed with the state as an emergency shelter for other rescues that might need to evacuate their animals. So,
this is a tough subject, and we talked a little bit about this off the air. Shelters for cats and dogs, you know, they do their best to try to find them homes, but if you're not a non-kill type place, sooner or later you have to face the possibility of euthanizing them. What is the situation with parrots?
Well, open admission shelters like generally the SPCA's or Animal Rescue Leagues, their policy is to take anything in that comes to their door, and so they are forced to deal with the unbelievable number of animals that are being surrendered to them. We deal with this in a slightly different way, in the sense that we get far more birds called for surrender than we can deal with. But we do two different types of adoption. One is a direct adoption, where we have a bird that needs a home, and we pair that up with somebody looking for a bird. Or we do what we call a referral adoption, and that someone calls me with an Amazon that needs a home, and someone has called me that would like to adopt an Amazon, and we put those people together and let them.
Okay, so then you take yourself out of being the middleman at that point.
Right.
You know?
We just let them.
You have to rely on them to
details.
sort of sort it out, so to see if because you know, in truth, you would, if it was one of your birds, you would really want to make sure that it was an appropriate fit.
Yeah, not only that, but we actually in our adoption contract stipulate that if it doesn't work out, that we have first right of refusal.
Good.
So the bird has to come back, or at least we have to have the opportunity to replace that bird. Now, that has come back to bite us many, many times, in the sense that someone will call me to adopt a partner for their macaw, another macaw.
For mating purposes?
No, just for companionship.
Company,
because
yeah.
they're flock animals, and so they have an amazing social dynamic in their natural world that we've denied them by selling them one at a time. You know, so we'll adopt out a bird to someone who's looking for a companion, just as a social companion for their parrot, and then something happens to that family, and we end up taking two birds back.
Oh boy! Yeah, you're right. That really bit you.
Yeah.
Do birds have personalities in the sense that you may discover that one just flat out won't get along with another one after you've tried it, and then you
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's love at first sight.
Right.
Absolutely. And there are certain people who seem to get along better with certain species of birds. So we have people we call the cockatoo lady who works for us, Beverly. It doesn't matter what the cockatoo is, she can get along. She seems to be able to have maybe cockatoo genes in her. And there are macaw people. And the same thing happens in adoptive homes. We have people that just bond with their birds really strongly. We don't know what that's all about. And the same thing with other birds.
Yeah.
Immediate or not.
Can you run a sanctuary? Can you run foster parrots? And do you have to sort of separate yourself a little bit from, you know, falling in love with all the birds, and not, you know, if there's a point where you have to give one up, or you lose one? Or
actually, it's interesting, because when we lose a bird, a lot of the volunteers, it'll upset them very much.
Yeah.
And it does upset me to some degree, but I think it really upsets me when I think about the big picture.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, what an individual death does to me, it makes me just feel that much sorrier for all the rest of them that are in captivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't It hits me. It takes me a while to.
Yeah, for most people, their pet becomes part of the family, and it's a pretty traumatic situation when they lose that, just as much as losing a family member.
Oh, absolutely. And I have personal pets at home.
Yeah.
That it's difficult, and we just actually lost the very first bird. He died, Wally, a blue and gold macaw, who I bought through the want ads in 1989.
Wow.
And that's how I got started in the whole thing.
I was going to ask you that. How did it all get started for you?
I basically fell into the same trap everybody else does. I mean, I thought, wow, that sounds like a pretty cool idea for a pet. And it wasn't until my cousin, who I thought would make an ideal home for a bird, told me he could never live with a captive parrot in his house, a captive bird, that it really hit me. And this is like a few years after I had bought Wally, that, yeah, there's something really inherently wrong with this picture. And
could you say that about any bird, really?
I could say that about any bird. I mean, I guess
from a parakeet
from
to
parakeets or finches, if somebody was truly dedicated and opened a big space, a nice space in their house to let them fly around, in a room with an outdoor component so that they could get out and get the sunshine and get the physical exercise they really need. I guess that's where my compromise would say, okay, we can keep birds as pets, but it's got to be under a much better situation than they are now. I mean, when you go to a pet store and you see a cage that's a foot wide by 15 inches.
And you can't, they may look happy, but you can't tell, and they probably are.
Well, and again, we go back to this companionship. They'll say you're one parrot or one parakeet. Parakeets live in flocks of 10,000.
Yeah.
They're used to.
Well, you had 30 in your apartment. So,
well,
yeah, that was a start.
It was a start. But we've learned a lot, actually, over the last few years, because we thought the best thing we could do for them is put them in large groups. And that's actually not the way most parrots live in the wild. There are many species who do, but many of the commonly kept ones, you have to keep in very small groups, or they'll fight.
But, I wish we had more time because there's so much more I'd like to talk to you about. But I want you to give the website out again.
Well, it's Foster Parrots, FOSTERPARROTS.
And if they go on the website, do they have the opportunity to learn how maybe they can make a donation?
Sure, absolutely. It's all there. And buy a T-shirt.
Go buy a T-shirt and make a donation. Thanks so much, Mark Johnson, for being with us today. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time. Take care.